Welcome in to another edition of Inside Carolina Postgame Podcast. I'm your host, Tommy Ashley, sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt and also Congruity, congruityhr.com/Tar Heels. Get your free assessment for your small, medium-sized business. See if they can hook you up. North Carolina 78-70. Dewey, I'm not going to lie. And I'm going to date myself, and I know you don't remember this, and I don't want to know how old you were at the time, even though you're a little bit older.
I just
1993.
turned 40. I'm not that young.
I know, but you seem younger. Carolina played a team called Florida State in 1993. They were down by 21 points. And they came back, and it was encapsulated by George Lynch with a monster dunk in the Smith Center. A game that I was not at my senior year because I did not have a ticket. Today, Carolina goes on a 22-0 run midway the second half to flip a game that looked like was going to be trouble. I mean, just insanity, Dewey. What'd you think?
Yeah, look, the best thing about this is that we got punched and we punched back. There was a toughness here to be down 14 in your own building in the second half and you can't throw it in the ocean. To tweak the way we were playing, Hubert brought Seth into the game and went to the press, and it immediately changed the tenor of the game. So Hubert deserves credit for sure. And the guys played harder. They scrapped and they clawed and they took the fight to Florida State, which had not been the case. Also, Florida State made a ton of shots in those first 25 minutes or whatever it was. They made a ton of shots, and we made hardly any. So there was a little bit of that they were going to come back down to earth. I did feel comfortable we would make a run. A run like that is probably not expected. But I was proud of the guys. They fought to get that game back in our favor. And the press was a big difference. So it was a good team win. I was happy for the guys.
Yeah, what's interesting about it, you mentioned that fight. I mean, let's be honest, we didn't see it a ton the last few years. And the intensity level that ratcheted up, I want to say a couple things, and then I want you to comment more on the defensive pressure, is I read the message boards, I read Twitter and all that, and folks were ready to send Hubert out, fire him into the sun at the start of the second half. Basketball games are long, do we? Talk about being in it before, not specifically this one, but just talking about 40 minutes doesn't seem like a long time, but it is a lifetime during a basketball game. You've been in it, you've seen the ups and downs. How impressed were you that this team just sort of flipped out of it, went to that press, and then just took off?
Yeah, look, the college game, because of the TV timeouts, it feels until the end feels like 4 minute segments, right? You do feel that as players, like you're so aware of when the TV timeouts are coming. So you feel like those segments. So if you get down, you can talk. You can talk in a huddle about, hey, let's just win this segment. Let's win the next 4 minutes, and that'll be the next time you're over here talking to me if you're the coach. And the first 4 minutes of the second half were no good at all. So in that under 16, and I'm not going to get it exactly right, but somewhere around there was when we went to the press and things started to shift. But in that under 16, you could imagine a head coach or imagine Hubert saying, hey guys, we're down 14 or whatever. Let's win the next 4 minutes. And that 4 minutes, especially when you're pressing and there's a lot more possessions because the pace is up and there's turnovers, that's an eternity to turn a game around. And you saw us do that. I see some of the comments in the chat of that game felt unwinnable. That's an emotional reaction, and it's great that our kids kept their poise, listened to their head coach, changed into the full court pressure, raised their level, and started getting a whole bunch of easy buckets. And that's what changed it. But again, like we said at the top, the fact that we punched back, I think there's fair comments in the chat that this is a game that last year's team does not win. I think that's fair. It's a different group. And I really do think Seth Trimble, when he checked in, his athleticism, his speed, his defensive pressure was a huge catalyst, along with going to the full court to turn this game around. He deserves credit. That's not going to show up in the box score.
Yeah, how difficult is it to stay disciplined in a full court press? You know, a lot of times, and back in the day, I used to love to see teams try to press Ty Lawson because you knew it was going to end up in a dunk on the other end. I can go back all the way to Stackhouse and Wallace and Donald Williams and Jeff McInnes and those guys, especially against Kentucky and Georgetown in '95,
Yeah.
where they would break press and it's a dunk every time. How difficult is it for a player, whether it's Harrison Ingram at the top or guys on the back end, to stay disciplined, not to give up that 2-on-1 break that Jim Boeheim mentioned that you'll
Mm-hmm.
often get up if you slip just a little bit? Carolina was
Right.
solid throughout that.
I think we gave up one on the alley oop, right? And then they had a couple other chances around the rim that they didn't convert. You're inevitably going to give those up if you press consecutive possessions. Discipline in the press is an interesting question. It's kind of calculated gambling is really what it is, right? Especially when you're playing the safety spot after your teammates going double and you're trying to pick between where you think that pass might go. He had Elliott at the top of the diamond, which proved fruitful because of his speed, that he had that great steal on the one that was coming down towards the bottom of the TV screen. But it's calculated gambling, right? You've got a couple guys that end up being in what we would refer to, or Coach Williams would refer to, in the safety spot, like a football reference. You're in the safety spot. So when a double goes, you're kind of zoning up, but you have to make a decision. And I can hear Coach Williams saying when we would work on press stuff, and we did more of our pressing in the half court, but I can hear him in my head saying the worst thing you can do as the safety is be indecisive, right? So you got to make a gamble. The guy's going to jump and look over the top to either the guy to your left or the guy to your right. And so the worst thing you do is not try to go steal one of them and be indecisive. And so I can hear him saying that. I can also hear him saying when you're the two guys doubling, as soon as that ball leaves, if you don't turn and sprint out of that double and get back and help your team, you're coming and sitting next to me. So a good coaching point there that maybe perhaps you wouldn't think of is what do you need your guys to do that we're attempting to double once that pass leaves? Well, his thing was, if you don't sprint your ass out of that trap, you're coming to sit by me. So I imagine Hubert was given some of those same principles. But again, we didn't do a ton of full court stuff under Coach Williams. This was a little bit of a different deal when you have somebody as athletic and long as Harrison on the ball. That creates issues. And look, it worked really well. You heard Boeheim keep saying Florida State doesn't have a point guard. Florida State doesn't have a point guard. There's probably something to that if they struggle to handle the ball against pressure. I don't know if there's something we saw on tape or it was just Hubert felt like he had to change the rhythm of the game. Whatever it was, worked.
Indeed, I mean and also it sort of negated their length. I mean, those guys were ridiculously
Huge.
long. It's like storks out there,
Yeah.
and so getting them move and pressing them up it negated that aspect of it. They couldn't come down court. They couldn't post up somebody. Somebody in the chat said Elliot Cadeau's growing up right before our very eyes. Dewey, somebody on the message board, and
Man,
I've said that dude's different.
he's coming. He's coming.
Just what do you see from him that makes him different?
Yeah. Well, the best compliment I can give, right? And I'm not making this up, right? I'm going to show on my phone, right? I'm going to take a little screenshot and I'm going to zoom in on this group chat, this one right here. Okay. The members of that group chat are Tyler Hansbrough, Wes Miller, Eric Hoots, Bobby Fraser, Danny Green, and Marcus Gainer. And the last probably 10 comments during the game were all about how good Elliott is from all different guys. Danny included, Tyler included. I mean, high praise from those guys. And he's 7 games in? The light bulb is coming and he's going to be a problem.
Yeah, he figures out the free throws and he shoots about 85% of free throws down the stretch. I mean, there's nothing you can do with him. That's the cool thing. And I wanted to shift, since we didn't talk about him much the other night, is R.J. Davis sort of proved that he's the guy. I mean, he's the leader of the guy. He's the guy you want to take the big shot. He's the guy you want to be on the free throw line. his growth. Obviously, you got Cadeau who's 7 games into a career. You got R.J. Davis who's 130 games into a career or something like that. The importance of having somebody, whether they're young or old, that wants the ball to step up and take a shot, and not only wants it, can actually get it done, especially if it comes down to the free throw line. Talk about RJ.
Yeah, what's so impressive to me about RJ at his size, because he's not only short but he is slight, is that he's a three-level scorer. It is difficult at that size to be a three-level scorer, but he has the ability to get to the rim and finish and get fouled. He has a ability to pull up and hit the mid-range. Like in the first half when we were playing better to start, we had that turnover. He came down 1-on-4 and just pulled up and ripped a 17-footer. Like, I mean, the confidence to take that shot. Well, he probably already knows he's not coming out, so that helps. But but the confidence to take and make that shot with no rebounders under the rim. So he's got that mid range, and then obviously is a gifted 3-point shooter off the bounce, off the catch, and that deep three that he hit with a minute and change to go when Florida State pushed back was a gigantic shot. That was the dagger. And there just shouldn't be anything that'll ever rattle him, right? And now that, as we talked about after the Tennessee game, now that he's freed up mentally from having to run the team as Elliott is going to continue to play more and more minutes, he could be who he is, which is flat out a scorer. He's a flat out scorer. He's not a great defender. He wasn't a great point guard. That's not a knock on him. It's the body of work that we watched the tape, right? He's not a great point guard, but he can flat out score. And so now that is just his role, just go be you. That's got to be a feeling of freedom that he enjoys right now.
Yeah, when you were talking about it, I was thinking he's just free. I mean, he is finally free to be himself. He scored a ton of points in high school. He scored a lot of points at North Carolina, but to your point, that point guard, it's not an albatross for a guy, but it is a heavy weight to carry to be a point guard at North Carolina. And now with Cadeau's ascension, he's virtually free of it. I mean, he can still do it, and he will still do it. Cadeau needs to stay out of the silly fouls.
Foul trouble. Yep.
Yeah, and that's sort of what led to Florida State stepping up. What'd you see that caused North Carolina to, other than Florida State shooting ridiculous, what did you see? What were they doing? Were they just out hustling Carolina? Were they just too tall and too long? What was the issue there that got Carolina down?
Yeah, a little bit of everything. I thought we didn't get to some 50-50 balls that once we went to the press and played a little harder, we did. So they were beating us 50-50 balls, made a ton of shots. And we didn't have great rhythm offensively when we were walking the ball up. We've talked about this for years, Tommy. When you're not getting stops and you have to play in the half court, it's not how we practice, right? We practice at pace. And so when you're walking the ball up, and then you add that a lot of times they had 5 guys with extreme length trying to score against a set defense with guys that big. Or, I mean, how many deflections did Florida State have? I mean, they got their hands on so many passes and block shots, and playing against a set defense was the struggle because of their size. So once we got into the press, started to get them to turn the ball over and sped them up, we got way more easy baskets. And then, I want to say we broke them, but we did take their spirit a little bit, because then all of a sudden almost everything was a layup, right? Even despite their size, we're getting everything at the rim. So the pace was helpful, but if you're not getting stops, you walk the ball up, and they were tough to score on.
Yeah, and that's, those guys are just ridiculously long. We talked about it earlier. You hate to see Cameron Fletcher go down. That was
brutal.
Yeah, that's not good.
My eyes watered.
Yeah, and that's another thing. People, you see an athlete crying, and they're not crying because it hurts. They're crying because it hurts, and they've worked so hard to get there, and he's been injured. So hate to see that. But you talk about when Carolina sort of broke their spirit. I felt like on the play, and I think it was Green Jr. slipped, may have turned his ankle, and RJ just kind of stepped over him. I felt like the game was over at that point. Florida State looked completely defeated. Props to them for coming back and trying to do anything with it. What else did you see in this game sort of stood out for you? I kind of opened up the floor last game and last post game for you, and you knocked it out of the park. Bacot 13-13 against that Florida State team. I
Yeah, he
mean,
fought. He fought. I thought he was active. It's always going to be hard for him to play against that kind of size from a scoring perspective, but he fought hard. I want to just reiterate my shout out to Seth Trimble. I thought he was a gigantic difference maker in this game. Um, and you know, my friends on the text led the witness a little bit because I was behind, and Tyler sent a text about, he said, I love how hard they're fighting right now. And I looked at what time he said that and then tracked it in the game as I fast forwarded and caught up. I mean, it was literally from, a minute after when Trimble checked in. His energy and his forcefulness on the defensive end and going to the press was a huge part of turning this game around. So I do want to make sure that he gets his props. And then we touched on it, but I think Elliott is about to explode. It just feels like he needed 5 games to understand the pace and the way it all kind of works. And now he's starting to get confidence with the ball in his hand, and his ability to get to the rim and get into the paint and create shots should be huge for this team. Staying out of foul trouble, he's going to play 30-plus minutes from here. I am super excited. As excited as I'm trying to think who the last freshman guard this is probably Marcus Page was the last one that started to show glimpses early. I mean, you need to remember, Joel Berry, as good as he was, he had a really tough freshman year. Really, really tough. Go back and look at it. So probably Marcus Page is the last freshman guard that showed glimpses that had me this excited. It's unlikely we have Elliott for 4 years, but while we have him, I think it's going to be pretty special to watch.
yeah, he's going to get a lot of usage. Somebody in the chat, and let's talk
Kobe
about
White, good point. Sorry, somebody said Kobe White. You're right.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
They're different though. Kobe was straight scorer. Elliott's just a pure point guard, control the game. So a little bit different, but yeah, Kobe was strong too as well. Somebody in the chat said Carolina can't stay in front of anybody on defense. How? What's the difference in offense where a guy like Cadeau can get by anybody, RJ can get by a lot of people, but why is it so tough to stay in front of people on defense? Because I think that could be an issue for this North Carolina team, and we've talked about the size, but just sort of split the baby there. I can do it on offense, but I have a tough time
mm-hmm.
on defense. What's the issue?
Yeah. I mean, on offense, you're dictating, right? I mean, that's a simple answer. On offense, you're dictating. You're deciding where you're going most of the time. And defensively, you're reacting. It's like being a corner against the receiver. The receiver knows the route. The corner doesn't know it. So there's a little bit of that. I don't know if I agree if we can't stay in front of anybody. I think Trimble's really good on the ball. I actually think Cadeau is pretty good on the ball. He's just got to watch the fouls. RJ's not a good defender, right? I mean, they're going to back him down. They're going to try to go past him. And it's not like we've got a big-time shot blocker back there. Mono had a couple blocks tonight, but generally speaking, we don't have great rim protection. So, yeah, look, they're going to have to guard the ball, but more than anything, if this team's going to do something, it's going to be cohesiveness on the defensive end, right? It's going to be being in the help side, communicating, which I think they do pretty well. We talked about how they're together. I think they talk. We'll see. They got a gauntlet coming up. We're going to have a better feel about them defensively in a couple weeks, like we said. I'm not ready to declare that this is a poor defensive team. Let's see, because I do think that they are together and they talk. And when you talk, Coach Williams used to say this too. If you say where you're supposed to be, you're going to be there. All right, what does that mean? Ball's 2 passes away. I'm in the help side. I'm off my man. I'm in help side. If I'm physically saying help, I'm not going to be in deny. I'm not on the ball. I'm in help. So if you say it and then you communicate to a teammate when a ball screen's coming, this team likes to switch a lot, and they verbalize it. Switch right, switch right. They talk to each other well, so they should get better defensively. So I'm not as concerned about that. And again, if Florida State doesn't, go nuts from making a bunch of threes, have not even had to go to the press and change everything the way we did. But we'll see.
Were you surprised to see him go press, knowing what you've known about Carolina basketball for so long?
Yeah, I mean, look, I had to do something, right? We were down 14 in our own gym in the second half, and I couldn't get the crowd into it. So it was a great decision, whomever it was, whether it was Hubert or one of the guys on staff. And like I said before, don't know if it was something they saw on tape that he had in his pocket, or it was just where the game was. But yeah, look, a lot of the sets we run are different, so the plenty of things are going to be different, and you didn't see that the last 2 years hardly at all. So I mean, it's partly personnel, partly your opponent, but it was obviously a good decision.
Let me one more question before we get out of here. This is from B Mick in the chat. Do you think Marcus Page on the bench is helping Cadeau's development?
Yeah, I think we talked about this last podcast. I don't discount it. I just think it's potentially limited just because he's not on the floor. Um, but perhaps they're spending time watching film, and Marcus would have as good an insight as anyone into what it is to have the ball in your hands and run this program. But he's not a coach. He's not out there on the floor. So don't discount Lebo, right? And the guard that he was for us, he's probably having a huge impact on Elliott.
Listen to you referencing an old guy. I mean,
Yeah,
Lebo's older than me. Lebo could play.
Lebo could really play. Lebo's a good dude, man. Funny. Yeah, I think it's more just getting comfortable with the speed of the game and the magnitude of playing in college, right? Hi, I got a visitor. Come here.
The movie's over. You got more than one. You got one coming over the other shoulder too.
So yeah, I just think it's him getting comfortable.
Absolutely. Well, that is Dewey Burke. We're going to let him get out and spend that family time. Carolina wins 78-70. Shout out to Johnny T-Shirt and Congruity for being sponsored this podcast. Dewey, I'll say this, and I'm going to ask you this next time we talk. I love Harrison Ingram's intensity. I think he brings it across the board for everybody. But it's just cool to see a Carolina team play with some of the intensity that we've seen other teams have. But yeah, a lot to talk about here over the next several weeks. And you're going to be at the UConn game, so not with me after that one, correct?
Correct. I will be in New York at MSG. Like I said the other night, it's going to feel like a road game. And so we got to bring it. They're tough. They guard you. And so I'm looking forward to see how we respond.
Indeed. Dewey Burke, I'm Tommy Ashley. It's been the Inside Carolina Postgame Podcast. Carolina, pressure melts. Florida State, 78-70. Thanks, everyone.